How are you keeping your public transportation system safe and secure? We'll talk about it on today's episode of Transit Unplugged. I'm Paul Comfort, and I'm excited to have joining me today Kevin Scott. He is the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs and Security for the Bi-State Development Agency in St. Louis, Missouri. They run the transit system there, and he has gotten some renown recently for putting in place what they're calling the Secure Platform Plan, primarily around their MetroLink's light rail system with 39 locations. There are 11 locations in, and basically it's a series of fencing and cameras expanded dramatically, as well as cooperation and collaboration with local law enforcement, and a number of other steps that they've taken along the way to improve safety and security and the appearance of safety and security for riders. And the results are dramatic. For the stations that this new program has been implemented in, they've had a 50% reduction in incidents per 100,000 boardings. Amazing. These are criminal incidents that occur on the system there. He'll tell you about that and many more results, including dramatically increased ridership at the stations where this new program has been implemented, leading to the conclusion that when it's safe and secure and has the appearance of safety and security, people feel safer to ride. And that's what's happening there, it appears, in St. Louis. It's a great program. We're actually going to be headed out to St. Louis in September of this year to film an episode of Transit Unplugged TV with Toby Roach, who is the executive director and CEO there of that agency, and look at all the public transportation. We'll take a look at some of the things that he's talking about today. You'll get to see it in person. This is a fascinating show. Well, I think right now, coming out of Washington, D.C., we hear the message over and over again, safety and security is number one. I recently had the chance to meet with Mark Molinaro, the administrator of the FTA, and his offices in Washington, D.C., and again, reiterating that this is our priority. And it has been always for my career, 38 years in this industry, but now more than ever, it's raising to the levels of Washington, D.C., and the folks who fund and regulate our agencies are really demanding it and requiring it. And I think this is a good example of putting into place a program and that actually is turning into results that we all want to see, which is reduced criminal incidents and increased ridership. Join me in this conversation with Kevin Scott from Bi-State in St. Louis. Great to have with us on today's episode Kevin Scott. He is the Bi-State's Executive Vice President of Public Affairs and Security in St. Louis, Missouri. Kevin, thanks for being with us on the show.
Well, listen, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just read recently, you had a great article in Mass Transit Magazine called Safety, More Than Hardware, and it really impressed me with the work you're doing there. So I wanted you to come on the show today and talk about it some.
Sure. Well, we had limited space, obviously, in the magazine, so it's a great opportunity to kind of expound a little bit. But just to give you a little bit of history, I joined the agency in September of 2019. I'd spent the majority of my career in law enforcement. I was in law enforcement here in the St. Louis region for 27 years, and I culminated that career and spent 4 years as chief of police with that same agency before joining here. I made the move to this company to Bi-State Development because I saw a real opportunity to have a positive impact on a regional level of the city and the region in which we live. And so it was exciting. But when I made that move, what's important for you to note and your listeners to note is that Bi-State Development was undergoing a security study. And that security study was being done by WSP USA. And this was a joint venture between Bi-State Development, which is St. Louis Metro Transit's parent company, which I can get into in just a moment, and our area metropolitan planning organization, which is East-West Gateway. And that focus started specifically on the light rail system on MetroLink. And the assessment team that was here quickly maneuvered their vision from light rail and security on light rail to just the total public safety structure itself. What are we doing relative to how we use analytics, our relationship with law enforcement? How are we using hardscape changes? How are we using technology? All of those things came into play. What is our emergency management structure? Do we have a true long-term security strategic plan in place? And the answer to that question, quite frankly, Paul, is we fell short in a number of areas. All right. So that process had already started when I joined the agency. And when I got here, I began working with the assessment team that was on location. And we began to look at their study. And at the end of that first phase of their study, they made 99 recommendations for improvement.
Wow.
Only 99, right? But it was a matter of taking a look at these best practice recommendations that they were making to improve and professionalize the long-term viability of the public safety structure on St. Louis Metro Transit. At the end of that first phase, we began to work on a long-term security strategy. And Talby Roach, who was our president and CEO, who I think you know, that is his favorite document, because when we concluded the work on that document, that long-term strategy, everybody signed it. And in St. Louis, to get everybody to sign one document is a great accomplishment. So the mayor of St. Louis and the county executives of St. Louis County and St. Clair County signed it. All the law enforcement chief executives signed it. The assessment team signed it, so forth and so on. And what I tell people is we started that process 6.5 years ago. We've implemented the majority of those 99 recommendations. There are a couple of recommendations that were more predicated on long-term capital expenditure decisions by the company, which this project, Secured Platform Plan, actually encompasses. And so at the end of this project, we'll be able to say that we have implemented all of those recommendations that they provided. And so that was the best money that really was ever spent in our region. And how many times do you see an assessment done where recommendations are made where it's quickly vacated after that, like nothing really happens? And so we've held true to what that assessment realized and what everybody agreed to. And it provided a blueprint for a long-term professional strategy relative to public safety. What was not in that study, what was not one of those recommendations, was taking an open concept light rail system to a secured barrier system. That was a decision that was made by the company that was the next step beyond those recommendations.
Very good. Well, that's a great comprehensive background. Thank you, Kevin. I remember very similarly when I took over in Baltimore with the MTA, and the governor asked me, what do you want to do there? I said, well, I got handed like a gift, a 2-year study on the bus network improvement program, and bus definitely needs to be improved. And then we implemented that study basically for what was called Baltimore Link. So it's great to have a study like that done and ready for you. So for those who aren't familiar, Kevin, with By State, I know it's created by Compact of Congress and all kinds of cool things. Very interesting. Can you give us a brief summary of the agency and the modes of service you operate there?
Sure. So By State Development is the parent company. St. Louis Metro Transit is a DBA, a doing business as. And so By State has 5 enterprises. We have the Gateway Arch. We have some product along the St. Louis riverfront. We manage the St. Louis Freightway Association. We certainly are involved with a lot of different things. We also have and own St. Louis Downtown Airport, which is across the river in Illinois. Our major tenant there is Gulfstream. And so they've been there for a while and just renewed their agreement with us. And we have a lot of contracts with Major League Sports to fly in and out of our downtown airport relative to their trips into St. Louis. So obviously, Paul, the largest of those enterprises is St. Louis Metro Transit. That's where the majority of the employees fall. Under that business model or under that enterprise, we have 3 modes of transportation. We have a light rail system that is originally 46 miles long, although it's being expanded another 5.5 miles from our easternmost location. That will connect our primary airport, St. Louis Lambert International, to Mid-America Airport, which is in Muscoda, Illinois, which is another commercial airport. So along that line, both airports will have direct connectivity. And then we operate 400 buses. We have 59 routes, and we operate those routes within the city of St. Louis County, and St. Clair County, Illinois. For those of you that do not know, similar, I believe, maybe to Baltimore, St. Louis is not in a county. It's a county of its own. It's its own entity. And so the city of St. Louis is its own political state level entity. And so that's why I refer to it as St. Louis County, the city of St. Louis, and St. Clair County, Illinois. And then lastly, and not any less important, obviously, we operate a product we call Call a Ride. It's an on-demand paratransit service, and it operates under agreement within certain parameters of our main bus routes. And so we have all three of those online and operating. But I can tell you in St. Louis, and this is unique to us, right? When something happens relative to security occurrences, what the region really focuses on is MetroLink. And not that our other two modes of transportation are any less important, but by matter of perception, it really seems to draw the most attention. And I think when they originated that study in 2018, the original phase of the study that I talked about, I think that's why it originally focused on the light rail system.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then you guys also operate some freight tracks, right? And then some boats.
Yeah, so we have in conjunction with the Gateway Arch, we actually operate some river boats on the Mississippi adjacent to the Gateway Arch as part of that entire experience, dinner cruises or other types of events. And then the St. Louis Freightway that I mentioned is a collaboration, a regional collaboration to promote the St. Louis region as a freight hub, and that's led by Bi-State and coordinated by Bi-State. But that basically is a regional collaboration.
That's awesome. All the things you got there. And I mentioned you earlier, but we're planning to come visit in September and film for our TV show. We hope to showcase a lot of what you talk about today. So let's dive into safety. Kevin, last week, as you and I are recording this, I was in Washington, D.C. and had the opportunity to meet with the Federal Transit Administration, including the administrator. And they reiterated again that for this administration, safety and security is number one. It's the number one thing. And all transit agencies across the country, we've always said that. I mean, I've been doing this for 38 years, and I've always said safety is number one. But hearing it kind of from, Washington, that they're, delimiting things based on how well you're doing with safety and security, it's really moved its way up the ladder of implementation strategies. And you've got a great one, man. The one you just did in the magazine. And I know, like you said, it's known as the Secure Platform Plan. Walk us through that. Unpack it for us.
Yeah, so the Secure Platform Plan basically focuses on the MetroLink light rail alignment, the technology enhancement relative to closed circuit television. I want to really talk about that in just a moment, because that really has been a game changer for us. But the Secure Platform Plan focuses on the high security gating and fencing of really the 39 MetroLink locations. And we're not talking about limited fencing around just the platforms themselves. We're talking about running security fencing some distance down the alignment and then building virtual security barriers at the end of those fences. Obviously, each of those locations present a unique circumstance. We can't run fences across grade crossings, although I would if I could. But we had to figure out a way, relative to platforms with grade crossings in close proximity. What do we do there? And so we've used enhanced cameras, we've used signage, we've used no trespass panels across the tracks. That really is what it entails. Now, what is different is that along those lines, our fare collection program, our equipment, our fare media was relatively antiquated. Okay. It's been in dire need of attention probably for more than a decade, if not longer. I know that our CEO won't mind me talking about this because it's just a true fact. But what made this project even more challenging is not only are we talking about the security enhancements, the gating and the fencing and the closed circuit television, but we also have to completely redo the fare collection system. Our hardware, our validation system that we have in place now has absolutely no capability of talking to gates and communicating with gates. And so this was a perfect storm for us, an opportunity to go in and do this all at once. And so obviously the infrastructure side of this program had to begin first and has moved along at a faster pace. The fare collection system is right behind, and we are awaiting to bridge that overall connectivity to the locations that we have done. It's like building a tunnel under the bay from two different directions, and you're meeting in the middle, and you hope when you poke the hole through the dirt, the other side's there, right? I mean, it's a simple process, but it's been relatively challenging. And if you think about it, we have 39 total locations to include the new location at Mid-America Airport, all that present different circumstances. We're not doing any major excavation or major relaying out the geography. We're taking the geography that's presented, with the exception of Mid-America Airport, and we are just doing a retrofit with these gates, the fencing, and the closed circuit television.
Are you a transit executive who's making big decisions about AI, cybersecurity, safety, crime, and fare evasion? Well, what if you could get behind closed doors with a bunch of your industry peers and have a real, down-to-earth conversation about these topics facing the industry? Join Paul Comfort as he hosts the Think Transit Executive Summit, a one-day VIP meeting for transit executives only, run under confidential Chatham House rules in Boston on Monday, March 30th. We'd love to have you join the industry's best and brightest as we solve real-world problems and build stronger networks. To learn more and register, go to trapezegroup.com/thinktransit. That's trapezegroup.com/thinktransit and head to the Executive Summit page. We'll see you there.
So if I'm a customer, Kevin, and I'm coming up to one of the stations, what do I see when I walk up?
Well, you will see enhanced 8-foot welded wire fencing,
Okay.
and you will see a barrier system that is full height. It is a roto gating type system accompanied by ADA compliant swing gates that are not traditional door gates, but they open to and from. The bars just move out and in. And we did that because we were working in some confined spaces, and the traditional swing door type ADAs take up too much space or too much room. So that's what you're going to see. And then you are going to see a new validator there that you'll be able to hopefully use your mobile application and make things easier, and or a new ticket vending machine where you can buy a traditional paper ticket, and or a litany of passes or other fare media that Metro offers. And you will have the ability to scan your fare media, and when the system recognizes that you are a valid paying customer, the gate will release and let you in. So we've completed 11 platforms thus far that are fully completed, although we don't have the new validators. And so what we've done to bridge the gap is we're using staff at those gates to validate those tickets and then to proxy card people through the gates. And that was an important step in this whole process to show substantial progress, to see how everything would work. This has been a project where you can't build all this and hope everything works at the end. You have to have a beta testing phase. My team likes to refer it as the Project Genesis, but I refer to it as beta testing, that really show you, are the technologies that we're putting in place, from the type of gating systems that we're using to the type of new validation systems that we're using, will they actually communicate? And so there's a lot of steps that we've had to take along the way to ensure that all of these pieces will culminate at the end. But the most important step was really the first, and that is, from a security standpoint, your force multipliers that are complementing your entire security team that is out there. The most important force multiplier I believe that you can put in place is closed circuit television. And it is one that it was underutilized and or misutilized traditionally here. The cameras were, not positioned correctly. We did not have the amount of cameras that we need. We had a lot of old analog technology. So the first step to this process was to build out a real-time camera center, 24-hour a day, 365 days a year camera center, where now we're monitoring our camera footage, our live camera footage in real time. And we built that out in conjunction and adjacent to our public safety dispatching center. So it's one dynamic, but it's separate functions. When we got into the project, now this is where we're adding the additional cameras, and we're upgrading the technology to digital, and we're repositioning the locations of those cameras. And that camera center, we were able to bring that online pretty quickly with even what we had in place, has paid huge dividends to us relative to overall security on the system as we've moved forward.
It's very good. And you've done some other things. You want to unpack a couple of the other things and then we'll get into results?
Yeah, so because we operate both in Missouri and Illinois, we operate under a bi-state compact, okay? So in that compact, we cannot house our own internal policing agency. All law enforcement activity here has to be contracted.
Okay.
So we have contracts with the three major law enforcement agencies: St. Louis County, the city of St. Louis, and St. Clair County, Illinois. And then to complement that, we have a large contract with Allied Universal, who is our security company. And our security teams provide the most visibility on the trains and buses, obviously. And they deal with about 90% of the citizen contacts that we have. And then law enforcement ideally shows that level of visibility, but moves in when something arises to a law enforcement level. But what we've seen thus far with the gating systems that are in place, so we have 11 that are fully completed. We have the other 28 that are under construction, and the infrastructure, it will be done substantially by the end of this month. And we have a couple of cleanup locations that we'll get into that will take us probably into the later part of February. But the infrastructure, the power, the connectivity will all be in place awaiting the new ticket vending machines that are coming in. So we are there. But the idea, Paul, really is to provide as much of a security buffer around our product as possible. And when you talk about all the other things that we've done relative to that study, there's not one thing that I can point out that is the ultimate savior. It all fits nicely together as a package to complement in order to provide as much of a security buffer around the system as possible.
That's great. And what have the results been so far? I know you're not complete yet, but have you seen results?
Yeah. Well, so we're not. And so these numbers are preliminary, but at the first 11 locations, and obviously there are some locations where the census is much higher than other locations, but we've seen a significant increase in ridership to the tune over the first 6 months of around 169,000 riders at those locations. We're also seeing results at the fare collection at the TVMs relative to those gating systems. And we've seen at those 11 locations a 50% reduction in total criminal incidents.
Wow. That's a pretty effective strategy, my friend.
It's a pretty effective strategy. Now, that is complemented by the fact that we have full-time security at those locations. And so that is a challenge as we move to a more autonomous product. We will have to work through that. This closure, this securing of MetroLink will change how the dynamic of how we need to deploy our security teams. But just another quick fact, we just completed a report for the last 6 months relative to total incidents. And these numbers come from our law enforcement partners. We don't generate these. But in 2023, we were at 880 criminal incidents system-wide, 880 reportable criminal incidents. In 2025, we're at 499 criminal incidents. So that's approximately a 43% reduction in total incidents. We are very enthusiastic that not only are we impacting true security and providing a true security buffer, but we are also impacting the much needed perception of security in order to entice a wide range of potential discretionary ridership is out there. And that's really what we need.
That's interesting. So it sounds like, I don't know if you want to make this connection, but I'll ask you anyway. So the safer you make it and the more safe people feel, the more likely they are to ride. I mean, you've had a tremendous increase in ridership as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And let me give you a Satan's example.
Okay.
All right. The Cardinal baseball program here, that is the one thing that fills these trains. People want to go to a baseball game. Okay. And if you stand at our stadium platform on game day and you just do random interviews with people and you ask them, how was your ride on MetroLink? They will tell you, yeah, it was fine. Yeah, I would use MetroLink again. I didn't really feel any anxiety or anything like that. It was fine. But you ask that same person how his ride felt on a Wednesday night coming from Lambert Airport to downtown St. Louis, even though nothing happens to him, the perception is different. There is strength in numbers, and the more people that are on the system, the higher the census, the safer people feel. And so we're trying to create an environment where people feel safe. We have greatly enhanced the probability that they are safer. That's key. We have a real perception problem here in St. Louis relative to our product. The majority of the perception is driven by people, quite frankly, Paul, that have never stepped foot on MetroLink. Okay.
That's the way it is. Yeah.
That's just the way it goes. And that word spreads. And then when you get people here that ride it, now they have a whole different perception. I'm not saying that we don't have our challenges like everyone else. We absolutely do. But we are doing, relative to the Secured Platform Program, we're doing what we think we need to do in St. Louis. Is that what needs to be done in other areas? I don't have an answer to that. Only the people in those locations can decipher that. However, if there's anything that we're doing, any part of what we're doing that any of our partners, relative to the other properties can use to help improve their system, that's really what we want. But for us, it was taking that step to take that open system to a barrier type system. And we did this through, to all be putting together a funding package that includes a substantial amount of public money, obviously. But quite frankly, it also includes a substantial amount of private money to the tune of about $11 million.
Wow.
And so there's high expectations that as we're putting this system in, that we perform.
Yes.
And I told my team, the best thing that I've done in this entire project, in addition to getting to speak to folks like you about it, is I at least put the team in place. Okay. Some phenomenal people, some very smart people, some very creative people. But I told them at the very inception of this project to include HNTB, who is our design engineering firm. We have one shot. That's it. We have to hit a home run. And so this project is a security-driven project. And security is the priority, even though it's tying into fare collection, and fare collection is going to communicate with the gates, the type of gating systems that we use, the type of fencing that we use, the type of CCTV product that we use, is all to prioritize the security-driven philosophy that we've put in place. And I don't want to see myself on TV 3 years from now holding my granddaughter and they're blasting me because we didn't do everything that we could when we had one shot to do it. And I think that's what's important.
Thank you, Kevin. If people do want to find out more about this, is there a place online they can go and check it out?
Yeah, they can go to Metro's website. We have a project page that focuses specifically on the SPP project itself, and you can go to metrotransit.org, St. Louis metrotransit.org to get that.
Okay, we'll put a link to that in our show notes if people want to find out more. This has been fantastic, Kevin. Thank you for kind of breaking down this program, the Secure Platform Plan, and what tremendous results you have. Congratulations, and we wish you the very best.
Well, I appreciate the time, and we'll continue to plug away, and hopefully we'll be able to provide the expectations that people want to see.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Transit Unplugged, the world's #1 transit executive podcast. I'm Julie Gates, executive producer of the podcast. Many thanks to the team that makes this show happen. Host and producer Paul Comfort. Producer Chris O'Keefe. Editor Patrick Emile. Associate producer Cindy Raskin. Transit Unplugged is being brought to you by Modaxo, passionate about moving the world's people. If you would enjoy behind-the-scenes insights and updates from the show, sign up for our weekly newsletter, which has links to can't-miss conversations with the biggest names in mobility. Head to transitunplugged.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Transit Unplugged.